The chair calls the Education Policy Committee meeting to order for Tuesday, March 4th, 2025. And we have a quorum. We're good to go there. Representative Jordan, have you had a chance to review the minutes for Wednesday, February 26, 2025? And if so, would you approve the minutes?
Yes, Madam Chair, I would move the minutes from February 26, 2025.
Thank you. Representative Jordan moves approval of the minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the minutes of Wednesday, February 26, 2025 are approved. Okay, members, we have 3 bills before us on the agenda relating to school discipline, and the 3 bills are authored by Representative Bakeberg. We have several testifiers for these bills, and testifiers indicating they wanted to testify on 1, 2, or 3 of the bills. So my plan today is to invite Representative Bakeberg to present his 3 bills, and then we will open public testimony to the 3 bills. So Representative Bakeberg, go ahead and make your way up there. As he's coming up with his testifiers, my plan is also to move House File 1052 and House File 1436 to the General Register while we lay over House File 514. We will procedurally move the bills after we conclude testimony and member discussion. So Representative Bakeberg, welcome to the committee, and please present your bills. I know you have some presenters with you here, so I'll let you start out though. So Representative Bakeberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members. My name is Ben Bakeberg. I have the privilege to represent the communities of Jordan, Prior Lake, a portion of Shakopee, and in my normal life, I'm also a middle school principal. Today, we're going to discuss 3 bills related to school discipline. Before we dive into the bills and testimony, I want to be very clear about the purpose of these bills. The purpose of each one of these bills is to provide every single person that walks into our schools a safe learning environment. Teachers, paraprofessionals, cooks, custodians, district office staff, and even the principal. But most importantly, for kids, every single kid that steps into school. I also want to be clear that educators agree that there are significant disparities in suspensions. We have worked hard to address that and continue to do that. Exclusionary practices such as suspension should, and frankly are, used as a last resort after ongoing Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 interventions have been used and have been unsuccessful. District after district is sharing concerns about classrooms being cleared out, not having the ability to support the elevated needs of our students. One educator recently expressed frustration that he was excluding the learning of the 25 other students in his class over the behaviors of one student, while at the same time feeling like he wasn't doing enough to meet the needs of that one student. That is a perfect picture of the tension that educators feel on a daily basis, and frankly, we as legislators have an obligation and a responsibility to address that tension. I have heard concerns from across the state that balance needs to be restored so that all students can learn and all educators can teach. That is the goal of these bills. Definitions matter. Definitions are important. So in your packet, nonpartisan staff has done an exceptional job of talking about definitions, and it's important that you understand those definitions. And I'm going to just very briefly highlight a few of them. Dismissal means the denial, and I want to pause on the word denial because these are our fellow administrators. We don't take it lightly to suspend a student. It is a last resort. But a dismissal is a denial of the current educational program to any pupil, including exclusion, expulsion, and suspension. It does not apply to a student being removed from a class to go down to the office to process the behavior and be brought back to class. Exclusion is an action taken by a school board that prevent enrollment or re-enrollment, and expulsion is an action by a school board that prohibits the re-enrollment for a year. I've been a school administrator for nearly 20 years. I have never made a motion to a school board to expel or exclude a student. It is very, very rare. Suspension is an act taken by a school administrator under the rules of the school board, prohibiting a student from attending school for a period of no more than 10 days. There's a lot of information in it. If you want to dig into it, I would be happy to talk. But basically, principals have to follow something called the Pupil Fair Dismissal Act. It outlines everything that we do. And it's important to understand that suspension is used only after ongoing best practices are put in place to support kids. If a student is on an IEP, a plan is put in place, oftentimes called a BIP or a behavior intervention plan, to support that student. Alternative educational services is another thing you'll see in another definition you'll see. But basically what that does is it tells us as administrators what we need to do to make sure that kids are learning when they're not in our environment. And then non-exclusionary discipline practices is another term in there. This simply means it's alternatives to suspensions. So when I started my career, this was called PBIS, or Positive Behavior Intervention Supports. It has grown in different names over time, but basically it's best practices at how we make sure we have a safe learning environment for kids. These are common best practices. And I think we have to be cautious about, as a legislature, legislating and tying the hands of our school staff and putting specific things in law, because I can tell you from experience that I have changed my practice as I have learned over time, as I have grown as a professional through ongoing professional development, specifically in the area of discipline. So I want to just briefly highlight the three different bills that we're going to talk about, and then I'm going to turn it over to testifiers. So House File 1436, very simply put, this is a mandate reduction bill. It repeals the requirement for non-exclusionary discipline, or NED is the way I'm going to say it moving forward. And it adds a requirement for alternative educational services, but it's important to understand this is only in the case of exclusions and expulsions. And I'll go back to the beginning. I have in my professional role, I've done that 0 times in my career. It is very, very rare. The other mandate relief portion of this bill is it does allow for recess detention. And I think it's important that our goal is to keep kids in class learning. And alternatives to suspensions, one of those really good alternatives is to reteach the expectations of the school within the recess environment. Now, detractors will say, well, we need kids to move. Absolutely. And we oftentimes reteach behaviors while we are doing an alternative recess. It doesn't just mean a kid is sitting in a room by themselves. There is proactive teaching happening in these. We need to give our administrators and our teachers and our school staff tools to maintain a learning environment for all. That's what House File 1436 does in a nutshell. House File 514, it allows for the suspension of students in K through 3 without a limit. So basically what we're saying is we completely trust the administrator to determine the time, the length of time that they need to reset the classroom, to make sure that the other students' needs are met, to make sure that the teacher is in a place where that student can come back, and also to make sure that the parents or parent and guardian of the student that is struggling are able to be a part of the process to meet the needs of that student. That's what House File 514 does. It also allows for the continual ongoing best practices that schools are doing, and it allows schools flexibility to do what they feel is best for their local community. House File 1052 allows for the suspension of students in grades K through 3 with a limit on 3 days. So a student cannot be suspended for any longer than 3 days. To be very frank, in my time as an elementary assistant principal, I honestly don't recall a time I suspended a student for longer than 3 days. This is a common sense and frankly, a compromise based off of feedback. It also does repeal the non-exclusionary discipline and adds in the alternative educational services, but again, that is only in cases of exclusion and expulsion. Frankly, we don't need, when I say we, I'm talking about school staff, not just principals, but we don't need the legislature to tell us what best practices are. We are professionals and we know what we're doing. Recess, it also limits, it allows for recess, the recess detention. Again, this is a really good option that principals can use to keep kids in class. Because if we can process the behavior, do a restorative conversation between those that caused the harm, those that were harmed, it is a powerful, powerful process that we do. And it is oftentimes best to do during that recess time. I want to thank each of the advocates from across perspectives. And I'm just going to recognize there are different perspectives in this room, and that's okay. But I want to thank every advocate that came to the discussion that we had last week. For those of you that are unaware, I hosted 2 different listening sessions because we simply wanted to get people in the room talking to each other, but most importantly, listening to each other. Honestly, if we listen more to boots on the ground educators, some of the things that have been passed, not just in the last couple of years, but in previous years, wouldn't have gotten passed. Before we move to testifiers, I'm going to ask members and testifiers to remember the people that go to school every single day to work with our kids. Our educators, they have chosen to go into education. They do that because they love our kids and they want to serve our kids. So here's my respectful ask. When you come up and you give your testimony, I would ask that you be respectful. I would ask that we not name call. And I would ask that if you share an example of a personal experience, I would ask that you please leave that person's name out of your example. Would you want your name continually dragged through the mud for something that happened years ago? Okay, I have the experience of going back to the place where I was a teacher. And I have parents that are now, or that were students at one point. And I always think, oh boy, how did I act? And I'm like, forgive me if I was young and foolish, and we have a good conversation about that. But I would just ask that we do that. And I look forward to a respectful discussion about how keeping every single kid in our school safe. So I'd like to recognize Michelle Krell, Executive Director of the Minnesota Principals Association, and she is going to start with an introduction.
Michelle Krell, go ahead.
All right.
Introduce
Thank you,
yourself for the record,
Representative.
please.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to speak to you today on behalf of the Minnesota Elementary School Principals Association, MESPA. My name again is Michelle Krull, and I'm the Executive Director of MESPA. I proudly represent and support more than 1,000 elementary principals in Minnesota. Minnesota principals dedicate their lives to making a difference for children. They chose this work because they love kids and are committed to creating a safe, supportive learning environment where every student can thrive. Today, I stand with a unified voice to ask you to amend the non-exclusionary discipline policy that prohibits suspensions for K-3 students. We urge you to allow for up to 3 days of suspension when necessary, not as a first response, but as an essential tool when all other interventions have been exhausted. Principals and educators work tirelessly to address challenging behaviors through positive, proactive interventions and restorative practices. They spend countless hours coaching students, partnering with families, and implementing supports to help every child succeed. Principals do not want to suspend students, but in rare, serious cases, when a student's behavior threatens the safety or learning environment of others, school leaders must have the ability to act swiftly and appropriately. A short suspension provides critical time to assess the situation, develop an intervention plan, and ensure the safety of all students and staff. It also allows for a structured re-entry process where school teams work with families to set expectations and provide the necessary supports for student success. Without this option, principals face an impossible dilemma. Parents ask, when does the right of our one disruptive student outweigh the rights of all other students, including the victims? There are times when classrooms have to be cleared, students and staff are harmed, learning is disrupted, and students begin to feel that there are no meaningful consequences for harmful behavior. Families lose trust. Teachers, paraprofessionals, and other principals who entered this work because they love children are leaving the profession because they feel powerless to maintain a safe learning environment. This conversation must also acknowledge the impact on the entire school community. While we deeply care about supporting students with behavior challenges, we must also ensure that every child feels safe and valued at school. A balanced discipline process is not about punishment. It's about protection, support, and ensuring that learning can continue for all students. We must also trust the expertise of our school leaders. Principals are highly trained professionals with years of experience in child development, trauma-informed practices, and school safety. They know their students, their families, and their school community. They do not take disciplinary decisions lightly. Instead of a one-size-fits-all mandate, we must allow principals to use their training, professional judgment, and deep understanding of their students' needs to make the best decisions for our school. Minnesota principals believe in the power of relationships, social emotional learning, and restorative practices. But when these interventions are exhausted and students continue to pose a risk for others, principals must be trusted to make decisions that are best to serve their school community. So I urge you to support legislation which allows us up to 3 days of suspension when necessary. This bill strikes the right balance, ensuring that students receive the support that they need while allowing school leaders to take appropriate action when safety is at stake. Thank you for your time and your commitment to Minnesota schools. I welcome, of course, any questions. Thank you.
And Patrick Glenn, go ahead and introduce yourself for the record and begin.
Chair Medent and members of the House Education Policy Committee, my name is Patrick Glenn, and I serve as the elementary principal at Jeffers Pond Elementary in the Prior Lake Savage Area Schools. Thanks for allowing me to testify today to amend the non-exclusionary discipline policy that prohibits suspensions of students in grades K through 3. I'm here with the voice for the principals, being a principal, and the teachers and the parents of elementary students. Safety, as Representative Bakeberg leaned into, is the highest priority at all of our schools. Safety begins with quality tier 1. PBIS is an example of quality tier 1. We teach, model, practice, and hold students accountable to established building expectations. Through our Tier 2 supports, we layer in coordinated breaks, we offer check-in and check-out plans, we provide social skills instruction, consult with parents and therapists, create and adjust behavior plans, and coach teachers through the collaborative efforts of our teacher teams, deans, and school social workers to assist those who need more. Tier 3 is everything in Tier 2, but basically delivered one-to-one. And in most cases, Tier 3 involves the dean, the social worker, or myself at my school assisting a classroom teacher with any disruptive student who is disrupting instruction. We provide short bursts of support, a break for that student to verbalize what's on their mind, and then help them problem solve and follow through with restitution. And then we get those students back to class. Of course, there is also the support of our students with special needs. In my building, I have 5 special education teachers and 10 paraprofessionals, all of whom help support either resource programming, students who spend more time in the gen ed classroom or center-based programming, students who spend more time in the SPED programming. Lots of tiers. In all of them, highly dysregulated students also exist in the fabric of our school communities. Many of these students have special needs, and some are in grades K through 3, and sometimes cause harm at school and jeopardize that school's safety. In my 20 years as an elementary principal, I've used suspension minimally and with success to support these students. Suspension is sometimes necessary to restore school safety and allow for healing. This separation provides the gift of time to create thoughtful and effective reentry plans, ensuring that the return of a dysregulated student to the classroom is supported and successful for both the student and their peers. Reentry plans involve logistics such as schedule adjustments, reallocation of staff, and even modifying teaching spaces. These steps take careful planning and implementation, requiring collaboration among multiple staff to debrief the crisis and then make the necessary adjustments to support both the student and the broader school community. This all takes time. Secondly, victims of harm need time to feel safe again too. Seeing the student who harmed them back in the classroom the next morning undermines their sense of security and trust in the school environment. Parents of victims are often upset and confused when no immediate consequences are evident. They question the principal's decision to allow the student to return so quickly. At times, these parents contact school distraught because their children are afraid to come to school because of the chaos they witnessed. That chaos might mean the clearing of a classroom, possibly multiple times in a day. Let's face it, clearing a classroom means loss of learning for all of our students. Over the past 5 years at my current school, I have overseen a total of 14 suspensions, 5 in school and 9 out of school. Of the 9 out-of-school suspension cases, 7 involved students in grades K through 3, all of whom were receiving special education services. These suspensions were necessary due to incidents of repeated behavior involving multiple episodes of aggression against adults or other students within the same day. Each suspended student received a half day or 1 full day of suspension, providing the time needed to develop and implement adjusted plans for their successful return to school. Reentry conferences were held with the students and their families, creating an opportunity for everyone to come together and reaffirm shared expectations. These meetings emphasized a collective commitment to maintaining a safe, nonviolent school environment and addressed any necessary changes to the student's schedule or supports. These measures ensured that the student, their family, and the school were aligned in preventing future harm and promoting a positive school culture. Let me make a comment about the parents of K-3 students who I have suspended. They have been supportive. They understand that their child needs a break, a reset. They have empathy for the students and or staff who their child may have hurt. They understand that suspension is a last and sometimes necessary option. Members of this committee, I urge you to amend the statute to allow for K-3 suspensions again, up to 3 days, when necessary. No principal wants to suspend. but my colleagues and I, including teachers and parents, have found it to work in order to make the important changes to help struggling students be successful, ensuring better school safety for all. Thank you for your time.
And Lisa Carlson, go ahead and introduce yourself for the
All right.
record and begin.
Good afternoon, members of the House Education Policy Committee. My name is Lisa Carlson, and for the past 19 years, I've had the privilege of serving as the principal at Woodland Elementary in Eagan, Minnesota. I also have the honor of representing Minnesota's principals from the Minnesota Elementary Principals Association. I'm the president. I come today before you to once again urge you to amend the non-exclusionary discipline policy that prohibits suspensions of students in grades K through 3. As elementary principals, we dedicate our lives to children. We believe in their potential, their growth, and their ability to learn and thrive when given the right support. However, we also have a responsibility to ensure the safety and well-being of every child in our schools, as well as the educators who serve them. This policy, as it stands, is failing to meet that responsibility. One of the most difficult conversations I have as a principal is telling a parent that their child is exhibiting extreme behaviors at school, behaviors that are unsafe for themselves and for others. Too often, parents are unable or unwilling to accept that their child may have significant mental health needs. In many cases, these same children can hold it together at home, leading parents to believe the problem must be with the school or the teacher, rather than acknowledging that their child needs help. But denial does not change reality, and it does not help their child. We have a moral obligation to intervene early and partner with families to get children the support they need. However, for some families, the only way to truly recognize the severity of a situation is to be inconvenienced by it. When a child is suspended, parents are forced to stop, pay attention, and take action. Leaving work to pick up their child may not be easy, but neither is watching a classroom of students endure fear and disruption day after day. A short suspension, 1 to 3 days, provides a necessary reset, a clear signal that immediate action is required, and an opportunity for schools and families to come together to develop a real plan for change. Simply sending a child home early is not enough. The reality of elementary school is that teachers are fully engaged with students all day. The moment that final bell rings, they have to leave to pick up their own children from daycare or attend to their own personal responsibilities. Every morning before school is loaded with meetings with either parents or staff, and without time to regroup before a child returns, there's no opportunity to put new interventions in place, no time to collaborate with families, and no chance to set the child up for success upon reentry. This is not a discipline model, it's a revolving door of disruption. All of you would agree that what we're asking for is reasonable, the ability to use a short-term suspension as a last resort when all other interventions have failed. This is not about punitive measures. It's about ensuring the safety, learning, and well-being of all the students while giving families a wake-up call that they may need to seek some mental health support for their child. Members of this committee, we cannot continue down this path. We need the ability to act in the best interests of all children in our schools. We need policies and representatives that empower us to make the tough, reasonable choices necessary to keep our schools safe and productive learning environments. Please amend the statute to allow for K-3 suspensions for up to 3 days. Trust us, as the professionals who know and love these children, to use the tool appropriately and only when it's absolutely necessary. On behalf of Minnesota's elementary principals, our teachers, and most importantly, the students we serve, I urge you to give us the ability to make the decisions that protect learning, safety, and the well-being of all. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Bakeberg. And Representative Bakeberg, are you ready? And presenters also. We ready for public testimony?
Yes, Madam Chair.
All right. So now we're going to hear from our public testifiers, and I'm going to ask testifiers to keep your comments to about 2 minutes. I'll leave a little bit of leeway because we are talking about 3 similar bills at one time, but I also want to watch the committee time. So what I'm going to do is have Ms. Miller here set her timer for 2 minutes, and we'll maybe soften it a little bit, but it'll go off softly just to give you an idea of 2 minutes. Doesn't mean you have to stop right at that moment, but please just be aware that try to wrap it up soon after that. So we're going to start with our remote testifiers first. And the first one on the list is Brianna Sanders. Do we have Brianna?
Yep, I'm here.
Brianna's here. Brianna, go ahead and introduce yourself for the record and begin. And again, try to keep it to around 2 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Bennett and members of the committee. My name is Brianna Sanders. I am both a parent and the public health nurse for a small school in northern Minnesota. I come before you today to share my profoundly disturbing and deeply personal experience involving my daughter. On September 12th, 2024, my daughter was the victim of sexual assault that took place in her second grade classroom. A male student crawled underneath her desk and, in my daughter's own words, was pushing a pencil further and further into her privates. Despite the gravity of this incident, the school's response was constrained by Minnesota Statute 121A 425 on non-exclusionary discipline. Consequently, the male student was merely asked to write an apology letter, which stated, "Sorry for poking you," and was then permitted to return to that same classroom. In an effort to protect my daughter, I requested that the two students be kept separate for the greatest extent possible. However, due to limited resources and the size of our small district, this was deemed unfeasible. As the victim's parent, I reported this incident to both law enforcement and county authorities, yet I have not received any follow-up from either entity. Since September, there have been several other incidences involving this same child, and per the state statute, a history of behaviors needs to be documented prior to disciplinary action. The school has little recourse aside from expelling until a history of behaviors is established. So we are jumping from one extreme to another without protecting children in the meantime. There has to be something that doesn't allow multiple kids to get hurt or assaulted until the perpetrating student is no longer welcome and can be suspended from that district. In closing, I ask you to imagine removing your child from the school, teachers, and friends for being a victim. Is this really the best that we can do for our younger children? We must empower school districts to take more meaningful action in response to incidences that relate to the safety of our children. An inadequate apology note cannot possibly address the seriousness of the harm inflicted. I respectfully urge this committee to advocate for stronger, more effective protection for our children. Thank you for your time, attention, and commitment to this critical issue.
Thank you. And next we have remotely Joe Kresselt. Excuse me for mispronouncing a name. Joe, are you there?
I am here. I hope you can hear me.
We can hear you. Go ahead and introduce yourself for the record and begin.
Well, good afternoon, my committee members. My name is Joe Kresselt. I'm an assistant principal at Bayview Elementary School. We're actually the largest elementary school, or one of the largest in the Twin Ports area. And I think we can all agree that we should work to keep kids in school with their peers as much as possible. That seems to be the spirit of the non-exclusionary law. However, what we're learning is that this law too often paints principals like myself into a corner, limiting our ability to make professional judgments. This new rigidity amongst Minnesota principals leads to these chaotic classrooms, teacher burnout, and that frustration in our school community. I support these bills as a reasonable common ground to create those safe school learning environments for everyone. Principals in the state are extensively trained, but we do need the flexibility to make decisions. We have systems in place to promote positive behaviors at scale, and some of the other testifiers talked about that, what we call the MTSS process. And I've seen the benefits that school counselors and check and connect mentors can have with students who struggle with behavior, as with a robust school-wide PBIS program or social emotional learning curriculum. Investments in these areas seem to make great impacts, but I've also seen the negative effects of classrooms that are routinely needing to be cleared because there's an unruly student who's just out of control. I have received letters of resignation from staff members who have reached their limits. I've listened to, even today, I listened to there is a family in our community who's just frustrated because they're feeling like there's a particular child in their case who has very bad behaviors, and it seems to them like nothing's being done about it. And that's kind of eroding some of that trust that we work really hard to have with our school community. So again, I'm just asking for increased autonomy for professionals to make, to use their professional judgment. As a principal, I support these three bills. These bills continue to prioritize keeping kids in school while keeping the spirit alive of the non-exclusionary bill of keeping kids in school, but also providing that latitude and time to make those professional judgments. I think if we pass these, we'll see an immediate impact in Minnesota schools. So members, I urge you to support these bills to restore balance. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we have Susan Providence, St. Paul Public Schools remotely. Susan, are you with us? Not quite? Hang on.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
There we go.
Sorry.
Go ahead and
Yes.
introduce yourself for the record and begin.
So my name is Susan Providence, and I'm a special ed teacher for St. Paul Public School. So thank you, Committee Chair Bennett and members of the Educational Policy for this opportunity to share my perspective as an African-American educator. In Minnesota, our Black and Brown students are significantly behind their white peers in academics, as reflected in the Minnesota Comprehensive Assessment data. The gap is commonly known as the achievement gap. If our goal is to close this gap, we must ensure that students remain in school, where they can learn and grow. Suspension is not the solution, especially for our younger learners. As a classroom teacher, I do believe that inappropriate behavior must have consequences and that students should be held accountable for their action. However, suspension cannot be the only response. Every student, regardless of their race, background, and zip code, deserve a supportive learning environment and with respect to their humanity, uphold their dignity, and respond to a fear to mistake. Yet zero tolerance policy and exclusionary discipline policy contradict these values, leading to record high number of students being pushed out of the classroom. Alarming students as young as 5 years old have been suspended, resulting in millions of loss of instructional day. Research has shown that suspension do not reduce future misbehavior, nor do they improve academic achievement, school climate, or student outcome. In fact, it's more severe. The exclusionary discipline policy, the greater the negative impact it has on student academic performance, attendance, and behavior. Instead of helping students, we are breaking them down, making them even harder to rebuild trust and engagement and success. We must find effective alternatives to keep students in school, especially our youngest students. Let's focus on solutions such as mental health support to address these underlying issues, restorative practice to help students repair the harm and build healthy relationships. By revisiting these strategies, we will create a fair and supportive and an effective approach for student discipline that one keep kids in school and foster long-term success. Let's work together to make this happen. So thank you for your consideration and hope that we can come to some solution in which to keep, especially our young students in the classroom. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll just maybe refrain from clapping, please. I appreciate the acknowledgement, though. We have one more remote testifier who's not with us yet. So, she's in the audience. Okay, we'll get her in on our list then later. Yep, so we'll get her on the list. So if, I think she's, well, go ahead. Yep, go ahead and come on up. Yep, and excuse me if I mispronounce your name. Is it
Idol, like American Idol.
Idol? Abdul? Abdul? Idol. I love that name. You go ahead and introduce yourself for the record and begin and try to keep it to about 2 minutes if you could. Thank you.
All right, I'll time myself. You know, I'm a professional here.
Awesome.
2 minutes.
That's awesome.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you so much for the opportunity to testify. My name is Idol Abdul. I am a Somali autism mom trying to retire. I haven't been in this building since 2023, so I took 2 Advil, so I should be okay. I'm hurt and confused by this bill. Why is the author wanting to kick the children from school? These are babies. They are 6 and 7 years old. Any adult who does not know how to calm down and support a child in a school setting is at the wrong career, especially when they have behaviors. The current House Speaker often reminds us that we are all here to do work for Minnesotans. How can denying children to learn in school is the work for Minnesotans? Who chose you for this job? I'm going to use political lingo, as you are all politicians here, and remind you that Minnesota is not blue, it's not red, my favorite color. It's a Vikings purple state. This means the voters want you to work together, and repealing laws that passed is not working together. It is a knee-jerk reaction. We've all heard of hip words this year that are fraud, waste, and abuse. Fraud is billing for services that were not rendered. If so, then when a school district bills for a child they did not serve because they suspended, wouldn't that be fraud? So if the schools want to suspend the children, you should get the money. You should get the money, because you know the kid is not there. That's number one, and that's something that Sandra Erickson, one of my favorite legislators, used to say. When my son was suspended, and I'm gonna keep saying their name, I respectfully disagree with you, Representative Bakeberg. He was suspended by Principal Jason Anderson, and Kelly Morris was the teacher. I remember that because that's what drives my energy. I want to remember that, and I want you to remember that, and I'm out of time. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Next, we're going to go on to the rest of our list here. And I just want to remind both observers in the audience, and our members already know this, but I appreciate respectful behavior. And part of respectful behavior for observers is that we don't clap or indicate positives or negatives with our voices. It just helps us keep the committee moving on more and more. So we're going to start two at a time here. Matt Shaver with Ed Allies will come up along with Heather Anderson. And I'm just going to give a blanket apology to anybody's name that I butcher here, because there's a lot of names. So I'm thankful that you'll be able to introduce yourself for the record. And again, reminder to keep your comments to about 2 minutes. Matt Shaver, go ahead and begin. Introduce yourself for the record.
Chair Bennett, members of the committee, good afternoon. My name is Matt Shaver. I'm an elementary school teacher and the senior policy director at Ed Allies. I'm here today to testify in opposition to the discipline bills under consideration. I want to thank Representative Bakeberg for convening a couple of sessions last week to bring together a group of interested parties to discuss these bills. The easy thing to do is write off people you disagree with as just being wrong or bad, and I appreciate your willingness to engage in tough and candid conversations. I'm going to focus our comments on the bill that, based on the written testimony, has the consensus support of AMSD, MSBA, and the Principals Association. That's House File 1052. All three letters, other letters mention how House File 1052 provides the flexibility schools need. The question is flexibility to do what? I'll start at the end and work my way up. So the repealer on line 3.16 of House File 1052 repeals 121A.611, which had bipartisan authorship in 2023. Starting with item G there at the very bottom, schools want the flexibility to, quote, withhold or excessively delay a student's participation in mealtime. I know there's a wide variety of opinions in the room on discipline, but I sincerely hope there aren't people here who genuinely believe it's appropriate for an employee of a public school district to withhold a student's participation in mealtime because of their behavior. The repealer also gets rid of limits set on recess detentions. Under current law, a school can withhold recess if a parent supports it and it is communicated home when it happens. Schools are asking for flexibility to sidestep those requirements. I took a lot of recess away from kids during my decade in the classroom. I used this tool when students didn't finish their homework or worksheets or weren't focused in class. My line was, if you're gonna be playing during class time, you'll do class time during your playtime. I thought I was pretty clever and delivering consistent, logical consequences that would teach the behaviors I wanted to see for my students. And in hindsight, I was wrong. This wasn't an effective tool because the same kids missed recess over and over. And instead of keeping a kid inside for a punishment, my time with them would have been much better spent on the playground, building that relationship. It would have made it more likely for them to respect and listen to me as their teacher. We grow and evolve as educators, and sometimes as a community, we set limits on what had been considered a tool previously. It's not unreasonable to talk about implementation challenges around changes to student discipline practices, and we believe there's compromise or clarity out there somewhere, but a blanket repeal of legislation, it's like fixing a leaky faucet by bulldozing the House. I want to thank you all for the opportunity to testify, and thank you for your public service to the state.
Hey, Heather Anderson, go ahead and introduce yourself for the record and begin.
Morning. Thank you, Chair Bennett. Thank you, members of the committee, for the opportunity. I come to you today as the child who used behavior sometimes in school in ways that weren't the healthiest, because guess what? I was getting beat up at home. I was a child without a safe place to go. I was often woken up in the middle of the night with emotional and physical and very violent abuse. I think this bill really lacks humanity. My children, the way that I lived in my life as a child wasn't safe. I had nowhere to go that was safe. And you know what my parents said to me? Whatever you get in trouble for at school, it's double at home. So I want you to just think about the fact that that we've talked a lot about what principals need. We've talked a lot about what educators need. We've talked a lot about what the other kids in the classroom need. But guess what? Behavior is communication. When children can't pull it together, it's not because everything is going okay for them, and sending them home 3 days sometimes just where the things are not okay and another stress situation and the people have to not go to work, is that good for the kid who needs something consistent? I think there's a third way. I don't believe that public schools have all the capacity to handle everything that we give them. I don't. I don't believe this principal has everything that he needs to get through his day. And I do think there is an opportunity here for us as a community to look at community partners. I run a homework club at Washburn High School where my children attend high school. It is a place for children and students who don't feel like school is for them to belong. I have a different relationship with them. We eat food together. I didn't have to try to keep them off their cell phones or quiet in a class for an hour, right? I get that the teacher has a whole different thing, but they get a second chance with me. I know about kids who need a second chance because I needed a lot of chances. And what I'm saying is, rather than just saying, nope, we're sending those kids home because we're the professionals, I gotta tell you, I was a really great little kid and I knew my own experience. I just didn't have any adults who listened to me and believed me. No teacher reported the violence that they must have seen bruises. Nobody reported it, nobody saved me, and sending me home wasn't an option. Okay? So what I'm saying is, look to community partners. The homework club that we have created now serves 60 to 70 students of color every single week. We offer them dinner, a place to do homework, a place to check in. There are other ways besides sending kids home and besides punitively treating children to wrap our arms. These kids, the ones who victimize other kids, they are future members of our society too, and you can either send them along the path of being suspended and criminalized for the rest of their lives, or we can teach them that we care about them, and there are many ways to show up in this country. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Tina Rusi and Mira Burnt, and then I'll just, on deck, waiting, we have Kate Snyder and Jessica Webster. So we'll start with Tina. And
good afternoon, Chair Bennett and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony today. I'm Tina Rucci, Public Policy Director at the ARC Minnesota. Together with self-advocates and their families, the ARC promotes and protects the human rights of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities at all stages of life. The ARC is so grateful to Representative Bakeberg for convening advocates last week to discuss the bills before us today. But I'm also here today to express some concerns. The proposed changes to student discipline policies and school district mandates risk weakening crucial protections, especially for students with disabilities and students of color who already experience disproportionate exclusion from classrooms due to systemic inequities in discipline. House File 1052 specifically would repeal the protections that bar withholding recess for kids as punishment. We believe discipline reform should focus on solutions that keep students engaged in learning rather than policies that increase removals and deepen these disparities. According to the Minnesota Department of Human Rights, students with disabilities make up 14% of the student population, but account for a staggering 43% of suspensions and expulsions. Policies that lower protections for young learners or allow school districts to opt out of compliance with essential student protections will not address the behavioral challenges that schools face. Instead, they will worsen existing inequities and remove critical supports for the students who need them most. Additionally, expanding exclusionary discipline without integrating research-based alternatives will push more students out of the classroom rather than addressing the root causes of behavioral dysregulation. Every student, regardless of ability, deserves the opportunity to thrive in the classroom. We must take care to make sure that that happens, and so I ask the committee to reject these bills today. Thank you.
Next, we have Mira Burt. Go ahead and introduce yourself for the record.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is actually Margaret Sullivan. I know you're probably like, what just happened here? But I am reading on behalf of a student testifier today. She just had to leave, and so we wanted to make sure that her voice was not left behind. So I'm just going to read what her statement says here. Hello, representatives. My name is Mira Coelho-Barron, and I am a student in St. Paul here to testify against House File 514. When I was 8, everyone at school spent months preparing for the most anticipated day of second grade. It was called Walk on the Wild Side, where we researched and created intricate dioramas of our favorite animal that were shared with our peers and parents. However, not everyone was able to participate. One of my classmates, we'll call him D, got in an altercation with another student. He got suspended for a week as a 7-year-old. D not only missed out on Walk on the Wild Side, but looking back was unable to properly reconcile with other students and heal from the situation. If that anecdote did not resonate with you, perhaps some numbers will. The U.S. Department of Education found that while Black students made up just 9% of the student population, they accounted for 36% of suspensions. Additionally, a peer-reviewed study from Justice Corley asserts that students who get suspended are more likely to experience incarceration and involvement with the criminal justice system. Every day, children as young as 5 will be missing out on valuable experiences in school and having the idea ingrained in their head that they are inherently bad and do not deserve to be there. I understand the concern for the safety of students and faculty. My dad is a public school teacher, and I still have relationships with teachers at elementary school who I love. The idea that their safety and that of students getting suspended cannot coexist is extremely misguided. How can those students be in a safe learning environment if they're not in a learning environment at all? And potentially in an unsafe home environment, exacerbating the issues showing up at school. In this bill, I do not see any new solutions to increase good behavior in school or promote healing between students after conflict, just stricken words. I sat in this very room only months ago as a participant in the Youth in Government, and with all due respect to the amazing work legislators do, those kids would have been able to come up with a more creative solution than this suspension bill that actually moves us forward. I urge you all to not only vote, but fight against the implementation of House Bill 514, which dismisses the educational needs of students across the state in favor of an easy way out. Thank you so much for your time, and please listen to the youth voices when making decisions about our education. Thank you.
Next, we have Kate Snyder and Jessica Webster. Come on up. And then on deck, we'll have Jessica Hoyda and Maren Hofer. So we'll start with Kate, please. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Caitlin Snyder, representing Education Minnesota. I'd like to start by saying there seems to be a broad misunderstanding about what the changes passed in 2023 mean. When students don't learn a lesson, a teacher doesn't throw out their lesson plan, we don't throw out the academic standard, we reevaluate and provide additional supports. One area of misunderstanding is the broad belief that students can no longer be removed from the classroom and that there are no circumstances where that would be appropriate. For both students in pre-K to 3rd grade and for older students, there are appropriate ways to diffuse student behavior. Administrators have a number of exclusionary tools in their toolbox. They can use in-school suspension, they can use out-of-school suspension for less than a day, they can use sensory rooms, and yes, they can use suspensions. If you look at lines 1.17 of House File 514, you will see the circumstances under which a student can be suspended from grades K-3. In every conversation I have had with a school administrator, and including in today's testimony, I have been told, of course we are providing non-exclusionary disciplinary policies and practices. That's just common sense. Why are we repealing what so many school leaders have said is common sense? The reason why advocates and students have asked for this best practice to be codified is that in some places in the state and in some communities, the data clearly shows that school administrators don't apply rules consistently to our students. American Indian students are 3 times as likely to receive out-of-school suspension than their enrollment would suggest. Black students are twice as likely to receive out-of-school suspension. Meanwhile, white students are about 20% less likely to receive out-of-school suspension. The largest complaint I hear about school safety from my members is that when our teachers call administrators to send someone to their office, no one is answering the phone. That might be because of a perception that their hands are tied, or it might be because of the educator shortage. But either way, teachers, like students, are not getting the currently allowed supports that they are asking for. We need more professional development in how to diffuse situations, how to provide restorative justice to students, and how to provide interventions. We need more adults in the classroom because it's much harder to behave inappropriately in a classroom of 20 versus 33. And we need more mental health support so our kids get more time with school counselors or school social workers to learn more about the underlying causes of their behavior. Ultimately, there is no policy solution for suspensions. This is about the educator shortage and overcrowded classrooms. I was in the conversation that Representative Bakeberg referenced in his opening testimony, and one of the school leaders that's with us today shared that we need more school social workers and counselors, that we don't have resources to have a sensory room where kids can self-regulate, that they can't afford to have an extra educator in a room on standby. And so because those problems seem too big to address, we've made the false choice to repeal the student-centered policies passed less than 2 years ago. I'd like to make a couple of comments on the specific bills. I appreciate that.
Just finish up fairly quickly, please.
Oh,
Thanks.
thank you. I appreciate that House File 514 has a limit of 3 days. That was referenced in a lot of the testimony. I will note for the committee, House File 1052 and 1436, the bills that you're planning on moving today do not have that limit of 3 days. They also have a move to alternative educational services. That's not defined. If we're talking about home-based instruction, there would be a cost to that. If we're talking about state-approved alternative programs, you can't force a student into that, particularly if the student has an IEP. And those, I think it's challenging that the committee would be moving bills without those terms defined today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Jessica Webster, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, my name is Jessica Webster. I'm a staff attorney with Legal Aid. And before I respectfully but strongly oppose all of Representative Bakeberg's bills today, I do want to thank him for reaching out to stakeholders in a fairly authentic way to collect input and feedback. And I really do agree that the only way we're going to move forward on this is really listening to each other and hearing each other. So I appreciated that. That said, I am here to oppose 514, 1052, and 1436. What I really wanted to do today was bring a giant picture of who we're talking about today. 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds. They still watch Peppa Pig and Bluey. They play with toys. Some of them still need help tying their shoes. Many can't read yet. Legal Aid cares so deeply about keeping our youngest learners in school, even when they make mistakes, and especially when they make mistakes. For too long, our state suspended kids, disproportionately kids of color and kids with disabilities, without really assessing what would happen down their academic road. What does it mean to miss 20 hours of instructional time? What does it mean to miss 50 hours, to be away from your classmates and your relational and emotional skill building? What does it mean to lose recess repeatedly when your body needs movement? When you're a kid who really needs the opportunity to build skills to meet adult expectations, and to learn different ways to communicate frustration, boredom, anger, suspension does not help you build those skills. Because I opened by agreeing that we really need to hear one another, what I'm hearing from our partners in schools is that not being allowed to suspend our youngest kids ties their hands. And while this is maybe happening in practice, it's categorically false that it's required by law. First, a teacher can always remove a student from the classroom. The school can even send a student home for the day. Optimally, the school brings the student to an alternative space with trained and trusted adults to work with the student on repairing harm. Second, in more extreme circumstances, and where there's an ongoing and serious safety threat, a school can issue an exclusion under 121A41. It looks like a suspension. There's a higher bar, and there's more due process protections for children. I have listened to our school partners. I really wish that Representative Bakeberg would bring us all together around something that we could agree upon, all of us, even the ones who are supporting these bills today and opposing, and that would be more funding for support for teachers in schools, for paras, for counselors, for wraparound, and for training. that we could all agree on, we could all really do well. I really wish I was here supporting that today, and I look forward to possibly having that opportunity in the future. Thank you for the time.
Next up, we have Jessica Hoyda and Maren Hofer. And then on deck, we'll have Jessica Webster and Alexis Kramer.
Hello, Committee Chair Bennett and committee members. My name is Jessica Hoyda. I'm a parent of a student in Minneapolis Public Schools. I'm a licensed psychologist who works with young children and their families. And I spent just short of 20 years of my career working in public schools as a school psychologist. I want to be clear that when we refer to HF 514, we're talking about going back on our commitment and promise of full and equitable participation in early learning for our 5, 6, 7, and 8-year-olds. For at least the past 25 years, as long as I've been following the research, the data on suspension and exclusion has been clear. Exclusionary discipline does not improve student behavior. That's the bottom line. It does not improve it, and it doesn't deter misbehavior. We have study after study after study. We have meta studies that include all the studies. The other thing I want to say is suspension harms children. It compounds attendance and academic difficulties. It increases dropout rates. It often results in more behavioral disruption and not less. Being excluded from school teaches our kids to disengage and put walls up to protect themselves and protect their self-worth from a system that tells them they don't belong because they made a mistake. Over time, suspension increases the likelihood that children leave our school system for the juvenile justice system. Dismissal also is not fairly applied. Again, this data is not new. We have known this for the bulk of my career. It's not surprising our Black and brown children, our Indigenous children, our disabled children, our children living in poverty, and our boys are disproportionately suspended from school. And these children are suspended for significantly less severe infractions than their white peers, white non-disabled peers. There is a gulf between suspended for disrespect and suspended for fighting. Behavioral disruption in schools is not a child-driven problem. It is a systems problem. And the solution up for a vote now, excluding our children from their rightful education, does not lead us out of this. As the adults, we are responsible for leveraging multiple factors that have been demonstrated to positively impact children's connection to and positive engagement within their school communities. 2 years ago, our legislators made a sound and data-based decision to protect our youngest learners from a failed and harmful educational practice. Please continue to stand with Minnesota's young learners and vote no on this ineffectual and harmful bill. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Maren. I'm going to let you say your last name.
Hofer, Christensen Hofer. Yep, thank you. Thank you so much, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Maren Christensen Hofer. I'm a parent of a child with a disability, and I also serve as the Executive Director for the Multicultural Autism Action Network. And I, too, am here today to thank Representative Bakeberg for convening this conversation with stakeholders about the bills. This was a refreshing change to be able to have a little bit of in-depth conversation, but I'm also here to share my concerns about them. And I would specifically like to talk about some of the harms of exclusionary discipline and how it affects our youngest learners. And I will note that all the sources that I will cite are listed in my written testimony if you'd like them. First of all, I would like to address the idea that suspensions are used as last resort. The latest data that I was able to find was from 2018, which showed that we used suspensions 33,000 times during that school year. We know, as we've heard many times, that exclusionary discipline disproportionately impacts students of color. We know that students with disabilities are twice as likely to be suspended as their non-disabled peers. We know that Black students are 8 times as likely to be suspended, and that our Indigenous students are 10 times as likely to be suspended. Again, we've heard agreement that discriminatory practices like these have no places in our schools, and yet we continue to use them. We've heard that suspensions are ineffective. We've heard that they often exacerbate behavior problems. We've heard that they lead to increased involvement in the carceral system. We've also shown evidence that suspended students have worse attendance, lower course completion rates, lower test scores, and a higher likelihood of dropping out. There is a study from 2021 that shows that even one in-school suspension increases the risk of academic failure, especially for students of color. The bottom line is suspending students causes harm. There is no evidence that it improves behavior, and the same is true of withholding recess. When I came before you in this committee in 2022 and 2023, we had near universal agreement that withholding recess from students did not improve their behavior. And I have to find myself asking, like, what's changed since then? What has not changed is our understanding of child development. We know that students need to move their bodies. We know that they need that social time. We know that that's an integral part of the school day, and it does not result in better behavior when we take those things away. I know that everyone on this committee is here because you care about kids. I truly believe that. But there are times when we have to decide whose needs are going to be prioritized. Are we going to prioritize the needs of the children? Or are we going to prioritize the wants of the adults? And this is one of those times. I respectfully ask you to vote no on these bills. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Alexis Kramer and Aaron Sandsmark. And then on deck, Araya Crosby and Tiffany Flynn Forsland. So we'll start with Alexis Kramer. And we don't have Alexis, so is this Araya? Or no?
This is Aaron.
This is Aaron. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm really getting mixed up here now. All right. Do we have as Alexis here? There we go. Thank you. Go ahead and introduce yourself for the record and begin.
Me?
Are you Alexis?
Oh, okay.
Yes, go ahead.
All right. Hello, Committee Chair Bennett and committee members. My name is Araya Crosby, and I'm currently a second-year student at the University of St. Thomas pursuing dual degrees in education and French. As soon as I received the message to testify against House File 514, I immediately seized the opportunity to do so. I can't think of a more vital time when teachers are needed than now, along with additional support for students in order for them to fill our schools to learn. Last semester, as an assignment, I was to research an education policy issue that I was interested in. I chose exclusionary and non-exclusionary discipline practices. As part of that, due to my experience with exclusionary actions firsthand in St. Paul Public Schools. Exclusionary practices have a history of being the default method to addressing and solving any issue or problem that arises in and outside of the classroom as grounds for overall safety. This includes suspensions and expulsions. What exclusionary practices tend to leave out are the rooted implicit biases predisposed against our BIPOC students. I'm a big sister of a Black little brother who's currently in elementary school. When he gets dismissed from school, it is me and my sisters who have to leave school to tend to him due to the 2 jobs that my mom works. I will leave y'all with these questions. How will parents who work 2 or more jobs to suffice for their families be able to tend to their children if they're expelled or suspended with no babysitter or daycare, or help their child catch up with the content that they miss out on? This bill will perpetuate the cycle of harm by disproportionately affecting BIPOC students, placing additional burdens on working families and failing to address the root causes of behavioral challenges. Instead of relying on exclusionary discipline, we must invest in restorative practices, mental health resources, and support systems that keep students engaged in their education. I urge you to consider the long-term consequences of this bill and prioritize solutions that uplift rather than exclude. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Aaron Sandsmark.
Hi. Thank you, Chair Bennett and committee members for hearing us today and taking time to consider our concerns. I'm Aaron Sandsmark, the Executive Director of Solutions Not Suspensions, and I feel passionately that these bills put before us in this hearing today simply roll back long fought-for protections for our children and would do incredible damage to our young people in Minnesota. Specifically, the children I'm here for are most vulnerable, are Black, Brown, Indigenous, and disabled children. House File 514, House File 1052, and House File 1436 aim to push us backwards on how we think about student discipline. These are repeals without new solutions. Our coalition, which is made up of organizations, students, parents, and concerned community members, didn't just fight for the K-3 dismissal ban and the mandates of non-exclusionary discipline because we don't believe in rules or classroom management. SNS has fought for the last decade to put the K-3 dismissal ban
in place because children of color and children with disabilities have been systematically pushed out of our schools in Minnesota at extremely disproportionate rates. In our meeting with Representative Bakeberg last week, which I appreciate, taking the time, we heard that we should trust principals and teachers to do the right thing and follow their training. If we could just trust schools to do the right thing by our Black and brown children and children with disabilities, we would not have the extreme disparities in discipline that we see today. The K-3 dismissal ban was fought for because we needed a safeguard for our children from bias and school push-out. I say this as an educator myself. Dallas Downey, a senior at Hopkins High School, wasn't able to be here today in person, but I wanted to read a few of his words. Dallas says, imagine, every building, even the one we're in now, needs a proper foundation. Similarly, children in kindergarten through 3rd grade need a strong foundation to build their educational growth. Early education shapes their academic futures, teaching critical skills. Allowing the dismissal of young children, primarily those from marginalized groups or those in special education, disrupts this foundation, causing long-term setbacks. Dallas goes on to say, it doesn't take a fortune teller to predict that a repeal on the K-3 dismissal ban is going to harm Black and brown students, especially those in special education. In Minnesota, Black students are suspended at extremely higher rates than their white peers. Misjudging behaviors of special education students as well often leads to unnecessary push-out and disrupting their education and the education that they deserve to have and have the legal right to. Please consider the rights and the lives of our communities. Our children. Do not let these bills pass through this committee. It'll set our children backwards, going back to the way things were. And that's where a place that children were harmed. So, thank you.
Next, we have Tiffany Forsland and Kulia Pringle. We'll start with Tiffany Forsland. Go ahead and begin.
Hi, yes, Tiffany Flynn Forsland, teacher of about 15 years. I have an AAS in early childhood education, a BA in child development, 5 through 12 urban education. I'm a Katie Williams Care Fellow, a Roy Wilkins Community Fellow, and I do restorative justice as I get more educated and do more community things. I am about the working together. I think as we try to work hard together, the racism is the piece that gets overlooked. It's the dilemma in our lawmaking, and I live it and I witness it on a regular basis. I kind of draft things to when I'm going to testify, but then I listen to everything and I don't want to give the same stuff, so I come up with different pieces to what people said. So the first person that talked remotely with her child as a victim, the harm person and the victim person, that is not always the case. And in most instances, it is victim-victim. To home fronts, the person that she feels her child victimized probably has some serious things going on at home that should be addressed. Isolate someone like that, they're just going to continue to be abused like the other woman that talked about her abuse, which is, again, another part of us coming together and relationships just being so huge. I just had a student, not elementary because I'm not there right now. I wanted to go more towards this authoritarian, sit down, do what you're supposed to do approach, which isn't really my style. But then I went and talked to another teacher, found out this poor kid had come to my school with a gunshot wound. He has already lost a sibling to gun violence. And I dropped my whole approach. This poor child comes to school every day and he needs our school environment. Sending him home is not the answer. I have my own spirited grandchild. He's 8. I want him to have love and care. I don't want him hardened. I don't want him to hate school. He loves school right now and he's a handful. And right now, I have an environment where he is talked to, loved, and still continues to love school. But it could be the other direction if he were disciplined with such a hard hand because he does his own things. And I tell you, there's days I would love to do something to the poor boy. But I just know.
If you
what
could wrap it
happens.
up pretty quickly,
Yes.
thanks.
And so that is, I'm in opposition. Relationship, getting along, and let's figure it out, and let's keep these kids in school.
Thank you. Kulia Pringle, go ahead and introduce yourself and begin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Kulia Pringle, and I'm a secondary social studies teacher by trade, but I'm here to you today as the Executive Director of Stand Up Minnesota Parents United and as an advocate for children and families. The families we serve across Minnesota urge you to reject any effort to weaken or repeal the K-3 dismissal ban and the ban on using recess as a discipline tool. Acknowledging disparities is fine, but it's not enough. For years, Minnesota schools' discipline policies were failing our youngest learners, pushing them out instead of supporting them. Too often, suspensions were used as a quick fix rather than addressing the root causes of student behavior. And we know who bore the brunt of this failure: Black students, Indigenous students, and students of color, and students with disability. The data is clear. These students were disproportionately suspended, often for subjective infractions, setting them up for a cycle of disengagement and academic struggle. That's why the 2023 legislature passed a common sense policy to ban suspensions for our youngest learners. We did this because we know exclusionary discipline doesn't work. It doesn't teach students the skills they need. It doesn't improve classroom behavior. It harms long-term outcomes, including graduation rates. Instead of turning back the clock, we should be invested in real solutions: restorative justice, mental health supports, and trauma-informed interventions that keep kids in classrooms, learning and growing. We urge you to stand by Minnesota's commitment to equity, evidence-based policy, and student success. Do not repeal or weaken the K-3 dismissal ban. Let's move forward and not backwards. Let's work on literacy by expanding resources to out-of-school programs and stop over-labeling Black students in EBD, which should save some money on special ed costs. We can and must do better. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Ali Alawanli and Susan Montgomery.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. My name is Ali Alawanli. I'm a parent, a teacher, and a restorative justice practitioner. Would you ever tell a child that they don't matter, that they're disposable, that when they make a mistake, they no longer have worth? If your answer is no, then your answer to HF 514 must also be no. For a school, suspension says, we don't want that behavior. For a child, suspension says, we don't want you. We cannot throw away our children. Instead, we need to wrap them in love, support, and encouragement and guide them in fixing their mistakes restoratively. Punishment and banishment only perpetuate the harm by further harming the child, who will in turn more likely hurt themselves or others. My child, like all children, is a good kid whose prefrontal cortex is not fully developed. Good kids have bad days. My child had a bad day. She was suspended. She was told that she could not come to school because a police officer had to determine if she were a danger. There was no PBIS, there was no Tier 1 supports that has been mentioned before. This was not a situation where all kids could learn. Do you know what this did to my child? For my child, she didn't want to exist. She began to hate school and refused to go. She didn't learn her lesson. Instead, she was made unwhole. Suspension stole a piece of my child. Suspension broke my kids' trust in school and adults there. Suspension increased my child's absenteeism. Suspension criminalized my child. Suspension murdered my child's spirit. This is not just unique to my child. As an educator and school improvement specialist, I've worked in over 25 schools around the metro and worked with thousands of Minnesota schools and children in the past 23 years. In all my years, I've never seen suspension have a positive impact on one child. The fallacy is that suspension will teach a lesson and students won't repeat the mistake. On the contrary, suspension further removes students from the learning community, and the sense of unbelonging actually increases the chance that the student will misbehave again. Additionally, most of the misbehavior and harm that actually happens in schools is by adults and the systems. Oftentimes, a child who is suspended is simply reacting to being harmed. The child gets shoved into the school to prison pipeline, and the adults and systems go unchecked. Suspension is quick and easy for schools. A kid breaks a rule, they get sent home. Actually taking time and energy to restore relationships, repair harm, and have real accountability and learning occur, that takes an investment. I hope you agree with me that nothing we do with our children should ever be quick and easy, and that they are worth the investment. Let us not go back to discarding our youngest learners, telling them that they don't matter, and pushing them out. Suspension ban was passed for a reason. Let us continue investing in our children. Please vote no to HF 514. I just also want to quickly notice that I work with the Minnesota Association of Secondary School Principals, so we're not even talking about elementary school principals here. And they were all coming to a training with me for restorative practices, saying that they also do not want suspension. So we're hearing from representatives saying that they represent principals around this country, around the state. I'm here to also represent those same principals saying that they are saying no to suspension. So just making sure we're hearing all sides of the stories and that we're here for the kids, right? Thank you.
Thank you. Susan Montgomery, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the Education Policy Committee. My name is Susan Montgomery, and I have been advocating at this Capitol for change going on 20 years. For 17 of them, I have fought for my son's rights, as well as those of countless other children in our schools, especially Black and brown students with IEPs. This is not my first time testifying about how school push-out harms. As a parent, I have seen firsthand the devastating impact on my own child. It broke my heart to watch my son struggle for many years. He was mistreated in school as early as preschool, yes, 3 years old, growing more violent over time. For him, it started with abuse by staff, bullying by peers, excessive restraints, illegal seclusions, unlawful police arrests, expulsion and suspensions, some of which were legal, but many were not. Instead of receiving the support and resources he needed to be safe, happy, and successful, he was pushed into the very school-to-prison pipeline I fought so very hard to keep him out of. 2 years ago, during his senior year of high school, he needed crisis intervention. Instead of the police arrested and charged him. He had never been in trouble with law before. I believe years of school trauma and lack of support and missed opportunity prevention led to this. Now at 20, he is trying to rebuild his life. He is taking computer class, participating in Healing Circle, Bible study, working as a janitor, and attending recovery groups, but all behind bars. This is the reality of what happens when schools fail to do the right thing. And we cannot simply trust that they will always do the right thing. Schools have been given freedom to make better choices, and the data shows that they haven't. We are looking to you as our last hope to ensure that our children are safe in school. Unfair and illegal suspensions do happen across Minnesota. Schools will tell you that they're doing everything right, but parents see the harm up close. Legislators listen to us more than school groups because parents live with the consequences of these failures every day. If you bring this kind of dismissal policy back, you will only create more stories like my son. Please do not allow this to pass. No one deserves this pain. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Shauna Doby and Naveen Solorzano. We'll start with Shauna Doby. Go ahead and introduce yourself for the record.
Hello, my name is Shayna Doby, and I'm Bryce's mother. I look around this room and I notice no one looks like me. So are you going to be able to feel me? Let's see. My son is 11 years old. He's in 5th grade. COVID occurred when he was in kindergarten. He was perfectly okay, normal. He had completed early childhood screening. They said, whatever you're doing, continue, because he could be the next president. I look at him as he is grinning from ear to ear, as he's dressed up in his sweater with his button-down shirt, looking like $1,000,000. He went into kindergarten. I believe someone spoke about mental health. I agree. My son has mental health due to the school system. He began getting bullied in kindergarten, and it never stopped. Not one day. I do agree with the lady that just spoke. I was trying to hold back my tears so hard because I too was also faced with watching my son in second grade jumping off the second floor. Please look at his St. Paul School District records. My attorney records should be in there because no one stopped it. I came to the school multiple times. No one did anything. So yes, you're absolutely, I agree. Behavior issues does disrupt the classroom, but what about management of those behaviors? PBIS, you said? When I worked in the school system, it was a wonderful system if it was actually implemented correctly. If the educators, the parents, the teachers actually work together collaboratively. My son is struggling in math, spelling, and writing, and he's in 5th grade. He's supposed to be writing essays. However, he can't even spell. I wonder what happened. Oh, he was suspended. You know why he was suspended? Because he continued to get bullied by one person, 2 person, 3 people, all at once. I had a phone call to come pick him up. Here's my son in tears, crying. Mom, how do you stop bullying? Is what he asked me. I asked the principal. Do you know what she said? Nothing. Trust is earned, not given. I gave you trust. The school trust, the teachers trust. I was there every day during COVID. I picked him up because he was getting bullied in gym. I took him to the YMCA. I did it. I cut my hours off of work. It's COVID. It doesn't matter. It's my child. Failure is not an option. I ask you all this question. Are the schools really doing what they need to do? Are they really, really connecting with families? Because guess what? I didn't know half of the stuff that was going on with my school, with my child, because the teacher never called me until I started popping up. Yes, I'm not from here. I don't play about my child or his education or his mental health. And for the woman that says that parents are in denial, how dare you? You're disrespectful. I thought we were supposed to be respectful. I'm not in denial, but I am saying this. My child's mental health was impacted by the school system. He had no mental health until bullying started in kindergarten. Until now, it has stopped. You know why? He started fighting back. He started getting suspended. They always said Bryce, 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 because Bryce is 5'4", 11 years old, 145 pounds, size 10 men's shoe. So just think about the problems he had at school and what people say about him, that he doesn't even have a chance. Because as soon as he walk in that door, they're scared. Do you know what names he's been called? Every name you could think of. So my question to you all are, we want to sit up here and suspend? My son got suspended because of behavior issues, because no one sat up here and listened to him. You think I'm joking? Look at his record. Again, attorneys was called. District ombudsman was phoned. I did everything that the school system wanted a parent to do. I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Bryce's mother. I'm a social worker. I worked in the school system as a program assistant as well as a community and cultural liaison. Did I forget to tell you all? I'm Bryce's mother. Thank you.
Thank you. And Naveen Solorzan, I'm going to let you say your last name.
Yes, good
Go ahead,
afternoon,
introduce.
Chair Bennett and members of the Educational Policy Committee. My name is Naveen Solorzano. I am a community organizer with Educators for Excellence Minnesota. I am here to testify against the provision to reinstate disciplinary suspensions for students in grades K through 3rd. Educators for Excellence is a growing teacher-led nonprofit that works with over 2,500 Minnesota educators to craft and advocate for policy solutions that impact their profession and their students. Each year, our members choose their top educational priorities, and ending racial discipline disparities is a top issue for them. While most our members are in the metro area, we recognize that without knowledge or alternatives and support, the K through 3rd suspension can feel as a burden in greater Minnesota. That being said, bringing back suspensions for students aged 5 to 8 years old is not the solution. The 2023 K through 3rd suspension ban is working as it has prompted school leaders to find innovative ways to support students who are disrupted in their classrooms and their teachers. Suspensions are just a Band-Aid and not a solution for students' socio-emotional challenges and trauma. They are only effective at keeping students outside of schools and unable to learn. These are some of alternatives to suspensions that our members have advocated for since the research started on this issue 10 years ago. Establish a climate or equity leadership teams, access and digest school-wide engagement data, meet regularly and collaborate, assess school progress, and identify trouble spots, visit and learn from other schools that have improved, engage in thorough and ongoing professional development and alternatives such as restorative justice and trauma-informed techniques, and receive coaching from administrators and peers. Instead of reinstating K through 3rd disciplinary suspensions, I encourage you to put forth policy framework and financial investments that support these practices. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Adosh Uni and Michael Thomas. We'll start with Mr. Uni. Go ahead and begin.
Madam Chair, committee members, my name is Adosh Uni. I'm the Director of Government Relations for the Minnesota Department of Education, and I appreciate the opportunity to provide some comments and concerns on these bills that repeal the prohibition on suspensions for students in grades kindergarten through 3 and eliminate the 2023 policies on non-exclusionary discipline. I want to start my remarks, like many others, by thanking Representative Bakeberg for convening the conversations on these important topics. I also want to acknowledge the hard work being done in our schools to implement non-exclusionary discipline across the state as we speak. We know that a truly effective shift to non-exclusionary discipline is work that can only succeed with effective and consistent partnership. We've heard clearly from parents, experts, and educators, and seen from research that our littlest learners stand to gain so much from a successful and inclusive education experience and stand to lose so much by the overuse of suspensions. Focusing on young learners' development in the K through 3 years can lead to decreases in suspensions, behavior concerns, disengagement, and attendance concerns throughout their future educational career. By doing this, young learners experience authentic, inclusive belonging, an outcome-driven and responsive discipline that focuses on repairing harm, teaching skills, conflict resolution, meeting needs, and rebuilding relationship, which helps with navigating future situations and helps to establish successful academic trajectories. MD has heard from the field. Schools across the state want to move in the direction of non-exclusionary discipline for their students and for their educators. And we acknowledge that change is hard, but MDE is here to help and in partnership with educators across the field and with families. MDE has experienced staff dedicated to creating resources and providing supports to educators to help implement non-exclusionary discipline. We'd like to thank the Elementary and Secondary Principals Associations for their leadership in connecting their members with the appropriate resources and working with MDE to draft intervention guidance with best practices for their members. I'd like to highlight just a few efforts MDE and the Principals Associations have taken collaboratively in supporting educators. Every month, MDE offers training on NED discipline, or NED 101 and NED 102. Every month, MDE sends out a newsletter specifically regarding resources, strategies, and feedback on NED to 1,183 subscribers across the state. MDE has developed a district and charter feedback and input system to identify current successes and challenges. The resource sharing and feedback networks are crucial to the sustainability of successful non-exclusionary discipline efforts and for MDE to identify and address relevant and common themes that occur in implementation, successes, and otherwise. And I'd also just like to note that proposals that do seek to remove funding for positions and teams at MDE, including to support non-exclusionary discipline practices, will also result in the loss of these networks of connection, regular updates, no-cost trainings, and ongoing supports that our districts rely on for the work that they do on behalf of our students. Thank you for the opportunity to provide these thoughts and concerns.
Thank you. Michael Thomas, go ahead and begin.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Michael Thomas, and I am superintendent here in the Twin Cities and also on the executive committee for the Association of Metro School Districts. And I just want to share, I've got some remarks, but just based upon what I've heard in testimony today, I want to just share some other components. And those who know me know I've got a 27-year history of educating our students and connecting with families and communities all throughout the Twin Cities. And I'm deeply passionate about what I do. And I've worked in large urban systems, I've worked in large suburban systems and everything in between. I have started my career in school-based, culturally specific mental health supports, preventing students from being over-identified. I've led equity in districts, confronting disproportionality and a variety of fronts. A lot of the testimony that I've heard today makes a lot of sense, and I think there's truth and validity into multiple perspectives that we've heard here. Those who know me also know that I lead in that middle space where I want to make sure I'm getting perspectives from every aspect of my communities that I've been serving to make the best decisions on behalf of my students every single day. I've also served as a building administrator, both elementary as well as secondary, and I've seen my share of real challenges in the classroom. I've seen my share of real disconnects with families and with community organizations and agencies where we find, people just kind of hanging in an abyss. I have permanent bite marks from a fourth grader, who was struggling immensely. So I've seen it all. But one of the things that I will also declare is that I will always be centered on what's best for students, even as a principal where I've had to make the real tough decision to suspend a student. I know that we have worked hard in the state of Minnesota to address issues of disproportionality and where we see impacts of suspensions that has been shared with research today where it can have long-term effects or short-term effects. I've also seen the benefits that it can also give me as a practicing administrator time to develop a comprehensive support plan to address this situation with a particular student. I will tell you right now, looking at alternative to suspension models that I've partnered with, I couldn't place in a day. Sometimes I needed a few days to be able to broker that relationship and that placement for that student to get the support that they needed only to return back into our schools. One of the things that I'm challenged by is that, however this legislation lands, as a superintendent, I take the responsibility for what happens in my schools and what happens in my districts. When I see issues that are occurring that cause me of grave concern, it could be 1 day, it could be 3 days, it could be 0 days. This is my job as a superintendent to ensure that I'm providing the supports and the structures necessary that my principals, my teachers can do the best for students every single day.
If you could wrap it up.
One of the things I would just say is that, should the committee move forward with the advancement of the days, which I understand, I would just want to share a couple of recommendations. One, is that we reserve some of that autonomy at the local level so that we can make key decisions that we feel necessary for our students. I would also recommend that language requires significant documentation of codified interventions before any suspensions were ever used. And lastly, I would just say, if we're going to maintain a suspension-free atmosphere in our schools, we need deeper supports of related service and mental health professionals so that we can ensure that we have the proper supports within our schools or through our community agencies so that kids will be successful, whether they're in our schools or in partnerships with some of those alternatives as well. So thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thank you. Next, we have Mikkel Pullman and Denise Schnabel. We'll start with Mikkel Pullman. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. My name is Mikkel Pullman. I am a special education teacher in the Chisago Lakes District. I have dedicated 16 years to this field, and I'm here to express my support for the changes proposed in Bill HF 1052. These changes are essential in providing educators with the necessary time to respond to student behavior and implement effective programming that fosters student success within the school environment. Behavior is a form of communication, and it's unrealistic to expect teachers to interpret these behaviors and develop new plans without adequate time. Allocating a day or two for educators to establish research-based strategies is something necessary to ensure the safety of both students and staff. This time also allows time to create data collection systems that inform educational decisions regarding students and to get the team on the same page. It is important to note that suspending a student is not a decision that is taken by educators lightly. Such actions are taken only after thorough discussion with families to help them understand the reason behind these measures. Today, I would like to share 2 stories that illustrate the importance of supporting the changes in this bill. The names have been changed for student confidentiality. Frank. Everyone needs a Frank in their school. Frank was a 2nd grade student that was adopted by a family in our district. Frank is an exceptional student who cares deeply, but faces challenges with self-regulation due to past experiences. Despite our efforts in implementation of behavior plans, Frank exhibited aggressive behavior towards staff. The team initiated a functional behavior assessment and developed a safety plan while the assessment was underway. We maintained ongoing communication with his family regarding the changes that were being made. Unfortunately, Frank's behavior escalated, culminating in an incident where he punched a staff member in the face, injuring the staff. Following this, the parents chose to take a brief break from school to reassess his medication. The decision allowed our team to formulate a comprehensive plan and ensure the safety for Frank in the school. Since then, Frank has returned to the school and not displayed any further physical aggression. We now have a clear data system in place to monitor and adjust his strategies as needed. The success for this has been largely due to the collaboration with his family throughout the process and the time that they have allowed the school to develop a plan. Due to time, I'm going to skip the second story, but the current limitations prohibiting suspensions in K through 3 are restrictive and have stripped the school teams of one of the most limited and invaluable resources, time. I firmly believe that schools are making significant strides to support students that they serve, especially in the area of behavior. Providing educators with time to develop programming and interventions is crucial and vital to the components of the student's success for safety for all. I urge the committee to vote yes in the support of HF 1052. Thank you for the consideration and this perspective.
Thank you. Denise Schnabel, go ahead and introduce yourself and begin.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, my name is Denise Schnabel. I'm the principal of Ramsey Elementary School and Anoka Hennepin School District and president of the North Suburban Division of MESPA. I'm testifying in support of HF 1052, allowing student dismissal in kindergarten through grade 3 for up to 3 days. Our current legislation, though positively intended, requires that students who have caused significant disruption, property damage, physical harm, return to the learning environment with no gap in that time. This does not acknowledge the significant amount of time and planning that is needed to happen to ensure that we have proactive supports in place to reduce this from happening again. It also doesn't acknowledge that there is time needed to repair the harm caused to ensure that students and staff who are witness to or victim of the events have had appropriate time and supports to move forward. It is not uncommon for a primary age student who lacks specific skills to become dysregulated to the point of throwing things, cursing, damaged property, shoving, hitting, kicking, and even biting. Although that sounds like an exaggerated event, this scenario is playing out in our schools daily all over Minnesota. In fact, in Anoka Hennepin this year, as of yesterday, there have been 184 documented K through 3 classroom evacuations. What is missing from that data is the detail and effort that goes into what happens next. The first priority is always to help regulate that student. This could take 5 minutes, this could take an hour. During that time, that class is displaced, the learning is impacted for the day for every student. Students and staff interviews need to be conducted, restorative conversations need to happen, and families of any students directly impacted need to be contacted. In all of this, the most important step is that principals and any supporting staff need time to make a plan to prevent those future occurrences. This may look like planning interventions, changing schedules, or aligning additional supports for students. Many of the staff who need to add input to these plans are in the classroom teaching or supporting students throughout the day. This reality is this step is most often cut short. In an elementary school, the principal is completing most of this on their own or with minimal support. So while they are supporting the students inside and outside the classroom, they are also attempting to conduct interviews, make calls, and support the classroom in restoring and feeling safety. When large events happen, we are in need of time provided by a suspension to make appropriate plans and prepare for a student's return. This is the determining factor in whether or not their return to their learning space is going to be successful. Thank you so much for your time and consideration.
Thank you. And members, that concludes our public testimony. And in consulting with my colleagues over here, we're going to actually not do anything with these three bills right now. Representative Bakeberg, I'm going to let you do a quick closing. We're going to move on to the next bill and move that quickly and be done in 10 minutes. So Representative Bakeberg, I know your plans are to work with, we've heard lots of good testimony on both sides. I'm going to let you just wrap it up real quickly.
All right, I'll make it quick. Members, what I would invite you to do, I did a listening session for stakeholders. I want to do the same thing for members. So I will, where we can have a good conversation. But I think you heard today about different perspectives, and I think we heard powerful testimony. I just want to say thank you to every testifier, whether you agree with the bills or not. Thank you for sharing your stories. I just want to reiterate one thing that one of the principals just shared, that there were 184 documented incidents of K through 3 classrooms being cleared out so far this school year. You know, I don't know the class size, but on average, let's say that there's 25 kids and we say that there's 1 hour of lost instructional time. That's about 4,600 hours of lost instructional time for kids. That's why I'm bringing these bills. So I understand there are significant disparities. We need to continue to work on that. I wholeheartedly agree that there are system issues, but I want to close with the type of people that are working in our schools. We had a group return from Wolf Ridge, and we had a teacher go through the ropes course backwards to ensure that a kid was able to complete the ropes course. So with that, I'll close, and thank you for a good discussion.
Thank you, Representative Bakeberg. And you could stay right up there, Representative Bakeberg. We're going to give you a workout. He's got to switch materials. So members, Representative Bakeberg is with us already today. He's the second author on the next bill, and I've asked him to present on behalf of Representative Kresha. The chair moves that House File 957 be re-referred to the Education Finance Committee. Representative Bakeberg has an author's amendment to put the bill in the shape he would prefer. Members, a similar amendment was adopted in Education Finance for House File 6, and actually we've already heard this component of the bill in House File 6. This amendment addresses an issue that Representative Jordan raised during our February 12th hearing, so that any provision that is otherwise restricted or mandated by federal law would not be subject to a delay in implementation. The amendment is also consistent with a similar restriction regarding fund transfers. So members, all those in favor of the A1 author's amendment, Representative Jordan, go ahead, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Bakeberg, and maybe Representative Kresha for this amendment. I just want to be very clear then. So then would this mean that schools would not be able to opt out of providing unemployment insurance to their hourly school workers?
Representative Bakeberg.
So anything that would conflict with federal law would be covered. So.
Representative Jordan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So yes, that is one of the ones that does conflict with federal law. So that would mean that school districts would not be able to opt out of that UI, just so we have that on the record. Thank you for that amendment.
Thank you. Members, all those in favor of the A1 author's amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Okay, the motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. Representative Bakeberg, present your bill, and our goal is to be done in 7 minutes.
All right, so I will just make it brief. This House File 957 allows for funding flexibility through the 28-29 school year unless it is otherwise encumbered under federal law. So really it gets down to allowing school districts the funding and the flexibility. We know that many of our districts are facing financial crises coming. So it allows districts that funding and some flexibility within the different buckets is what you'll hear schools talk about. And the other piece of it is the school district, and they have to follow a process, but they can implement the mandates passed over the last few years in a staggered form which best fit their local needs. So with that, Madam Chair, I will open it up to member discussion.
Thank you, Representative Bakeberg. Members, Representative Jordan.
Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you also and Representative Bakeberg and Madam Chair, thank you both for tabling the bills. It sounds like there's still a lot of work that needs to be done on those bills. So when they come up, I'm sure there will be a robust member discussion around those. We know there's a lot going on, so thank you for tabling those bills. My question relates to, I guess my question, I'm glad we took care of one of my questions. We didn't take care of my other question, which is, how is this constitutional? Schools have an obligation to have a uniform, it's in our Minnesota Constitution, have a uniform standard of education. If schools are picking and choosing which laws to follow and which laws not to follow, how is that constitutional?
Representative Bakeberg.
Yep, there are a lot of differences in programming options and different, implementation curriculum. There is a wide variety of local control that districts already have. This allows districts to implement the different mandates that were passed, the over 65 different mandates passed in the last legislative session that frankly are hamstringing districts. So the consistent piece that I've heard, and as I've looked into your question, Representative Jordan, is that we have unity, but we don't have uniformity over what happens in our schools. So there's some consistency that happens, but it is not exactly different in every single school district.
Representative Jordan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I know that I know that we're running for time here. So I will just say that I don't really think that satisfies, that doesn't really satisfy my concern about the Constitution. I know that that this is the Constitution. It is the highest law apart from the U.S. Constitution in Minnesota. And allowing school districts to pick and choose, can I ask one more question, actually?
Representative Jordan, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. So does this mean that if school districts are opting out of a policy, are they also opting out of funding associated with that policy that might be in place? Or is it purely a policy opt-out, or is it also opting out of funding?
Representative Bakeberg.
So funding in public schools is on a per pupil formula. So funding would go with schools. If there's a grant program, schools have an opportunity to choose or not choose to apply for grants. There are grants that are high school that a high school will apply for, and then there are grant opportunities that a different school doesn't apply for. So if a school chooses to not pursue a grant, let's say the non-exclusionary discipline grants, that is their prerogative to do, but the funding we fund our schools on a per pupil formula. And if we want to have a conversation about how we fund and the different buckets, I would be happy to have that conversation.
There's a whole committee.
Those are some significant issues that need to be addressed.
And Representative Jordan, if I might answer that question a little bit too, it's part of House File 6. It is the intention of that bill that if a school chooses to delay a mandate, they would also delay that funding, and we can work on language that clarifies that component if we need to. And then just in regards to the uniformity of schools, we have independent school districts throughout the entire state that are operated by their own school boards. We have a ton of, is the word uninformed? Well, whatever the word would be, there's not a lot of conformity in many areas. And so if that's the case, then we haven't been following the Constitution since the beginning of our schools. But these will have further discussion. Again, this is going to Education Finance. It's already been heard through House File 6. Representative Jordan, any wrap-up question or comment?
Yes, Madam Chair. And I'll just make more of a kind of a broader comment that, we say the word mandate, but what we really mean is education policy. We heard about one of these mandates from a lot of parents who fought for years to make sure that their kids would not be pushed out of classrooms because they identified those racial disparities and those disparities for children with disabilities. That wasn't the only bill that was passed that was brought and on the foundation of community feedback. And when we say community, we're literally talking about the kids in our schools. We're talking about their parents. We're talking about their teachers. We're talking about the person who helps them on the bus. That's where those bills came from. This isn't just, and that's what we're talking about when we talk about mandates. We're talking about things like making sure kids have access to mental health support. We're talking about kids that have access to teachers that might have different aspects of, that might have been licensed under a different way. Like, these are not just, mandates and things that we say just because. These are real laws that were brought by community. So I still would recommend a no vote on this bill.
Thank you, Representative Jordan. Representative Bakeberg, 30-second wrap-up.
Yep, we need to allow for flexibility for our school districts, or we will continue to struggle and we will continue to have budget reductions across their schools.
Thank you. So the chair renews the motion that House File 957, as amended, be re-referred to the Education Finance Committee. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay?
Nay.
Okay, and the motion prevails, and the bill is on its way to Education Finance. And members, that concludes today's agenda. Thank you very much. Our next meeting will be Wednesday, March 5th, and with that, the committee stands adjourned.